Hello, everybody. Welcome to what is the 6th episode of Office Hours with Professor Pat. I'm Pat. So these are my office hours. We're going to be mostly talking around Ephesoft today, but want to keep this kind of general to capture. So if people have general capture questions, that's welcome too, as well as any sort of Pepsi challenge that we might have. I'd love to set that up sometime in another session if somebody wants to compare capture utilities or something, configurations or what have you. So what we do here is I'm gonna have some standard type of content that I developed, but then it's mostly based off conversations that I've had or questions that have been going on. But of course, at any time, in case you're new to these, ask questions at any time. I have no problem deviating away from the content and keeping it pertinent to what you guys might be interested in. One of the questions or topics that I received this week, so I thought I would touch on it, is reporting. So there are two types of reporting. There's the standard reporting, which kind of gives you general dashboard health of the system, as well as throughput reporting. What's coming in, what's coming out, what kind of state are things in. And then there's advanced reporting. Advanced reporting is an add-on utility to the Ephesoft Transact application, and that gives you a lot more root cause analysis. And
do you have slides to show, Pat? We're not seeing your screen.
Yes, dang it. Thank you. Thank you very much. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So she sees me looking over here, and I'm not referring to anything. So we're going to be talking about reporting. So advanced reporting, as I was saying, is an add-on utility and gives you really root cause of what the system thought it was and what a person thought it was. So it really is when you're using Ephesoft Transact in its traditional sense, as in like operators that are dealing with review and validation, and then being able to get information so you can do something to the system to make it better. Let's go through that. And so let's first look at standard reporting. So standard reporting gives you kind of system health, as I was kind of talking about, server uptime, services on the server, system reporting, gives you the number of batches in each state. So, you know, what's inside of running, what's inside of new, what's finished. And then the analysis grid, which kind of gives you more of the page processed per batch class per day, average per, gives you some averages of what's getting processed in the system. So let's take an actual look at that. Alrighty, that is over, if I can get my mouse, over here. So as I was mentioning, there's the dashboard reports. And so let's go ahead and start with system health. And you can see that I just kind of spun this one up. So let's look at yesterday. So this will be kind of common where you can choose a date or a date range depending on what you're looking at. And in this case, I have uptime, and what it's showing me is the server that it's running on. And so this is much more interesting when you actually have a cluster. And so you'll have more than one server located inside of here, the uptime of that server. And then at the bottom, you have different services and who picked up the service. So, and which is kind of an overstatement because one of the services is pickup. And so there's different processes, and some of the processes within a cluster are dedicated to a particular machine. And so in this case, there's a pickup service, and so there's an assignee server. And so that assignee server looks to see what kind of availability different servers have that are in the cluster and assigns them different batches. And so you're working on this batch instance. The license server is what you can have. So you can have a single license. There's different ways that you can allocate or register your license. And so you can have a server that is designated as the license server. So it might have the total number of clusters or cores that you have within a cluster. So it might be that you have two 8-core servers and that are processing, and a single user UI server that's dedicated for operators. And so you might have 20 cores. So this would be the one that says, okay, when another system comes online, check to see if you have available cores, and so then spin up the service. And the folder monitor is another service, and that service basically looks for newly dropped instances in particular folders that are being monitored for different batch classes. And then what it does is it kind of kicks on saying, hey, this is a new batch. There's different, we're not going to go into how you can configure this folder monitor, but then it basically strips it apart into single page TIFF images and then puts it available for one of the systems to run. And so the folder monitor is yet another service. So those are the 3 services that are kind of designated on a specific server, sorry, I'm saying the S words too many times. So it doesn't try to fight between those and doesn't have any issues with a server, 2 servers picking up the same one and then causing 2 different instances to occur. And so that's what these are allocated for. So it kind of gives you that dashboard kind of capability of seeing the health of the system and that it is up. System reporting, as I was mentioning, kind of gives you, what's running in the system. I don't have a lot going on right now, mostly because I loaded up a bunch for this reporting discussion today within this particular instance, and I sent them all through. So I don't have a lot, kind of mostly finished batches, which are ones that I sent through yesterday, and one for a question that I have loaded inside of a validation for another session portion of today's office hours. So let's go ahead and move to batch processing, and that's just going to kind of give you some throughput. So you can see how many things are going through on how many days. You can see that this is a development system, not that busy. I threw through like 148 pages yesterday just to get some reporting data inside of here, as well as what kind of things are running per batch class, and some little widgets that are mostly pretty. One thing that you can notice is each one of these has the capability of being able to print, send to PDF, and more importantly, export to, it says Excel, but it's a CSV. And that way you can crunch these numbers in any which way you'd want. So let's go ahead and go through throughput. These are going to be very common, so I'm going to only go through a couple of these. And so there's the batch class throughput. I'm going to pick, right now it always kind of goes to today, which I haven't been doing much today. But you can see if I select the rest of this month, then I could look to see what I've been processing. So you can see that a little bit of invoicing, a little bit of mortgage, and a little bit of my Professor Pat type of content, as well as different summaries. Again, we're going to have a table on each one of these. It doesn't show a lot of the data per se, but again, you can either scroll through these if you're just looking for a particular instance. There's a lot of filtering that can take place so you can find the data that you're looking for, as well as being able to export it. The exporting I'm going to keep on saying because that's what makes it really useful, because if you have some sort of monthly meeting in which you need to report back some ROI perspective and what was automated, what was sent through these different documents, then you can export that last month, you can filter it to that month, and then be able to crunch those numbers, create pivot tables, do whatever you see fit for that particular content. These are going to be very similar per batch class for weekdays, hourly, time-based. This is a little bit different, the module throughput. Just to review, and those that are not familiar with Ephesoft Transact, a module is a unit, essentially it's a grouping of what is referred to as a plugin. A plugin actually has functionality, so very specific functionality, like you're gonna, an OCR capability. So you're gonna OCR, you're going to transform these into PNGs, you're going to classify each page, you're going to assemble them into documents. Those are all plugins. And then those are grouped into what are modules. So if you're doing any sort of root cause analysis of like what might be a sticking point or taking too long within the given system, then this might give you some insight as to what might be lagging or taking too much time. The other one that's kind of unique is user throughput. So if you're looking to see how users are performing within the system during the review and validation batches, you can see what those either batches are, or I can look at user effort, And you can see that there's not a lot of people reviewing these except for the system user of Ephesoft. But you can drill down to review how long did it take particular batches, what was the average it took. Again, you can specify the dates that you're looking for and have a lot of filtered view of what you're trying to find, like heat maps or charts. Again, I'm not going to try to go into every single option inside of these, but more of a general sense. Are there any questions? That kind of covers the general standard support reporting. Go ahead and put them inside of the questions area if you have any questions, and I will just continue going. So the next thing is advanced reporting. So again, this is an add-on. It compares what the computer thought and what operators think. And so this gives you a lot of information on how you can better the system, especially if you've had the system for a long period of time, because it could be that you have it very finely tuned and a bunch of documents changed, or you might have new vendors, or just different formats of documents that you created internally, and then all of a sudden things are different. And so there's two different general classification or general topics around this. It's classification and extraction. So within classification, there's the capability of saying that there's a high level accuracy around that classification and who does what kind of correction was done. It was this document type with the computer thought, and then it was changed to this document type. Then there's separation accuracy, and so during the assembly, it figures out and reassembles pages into documents. This is the standard ways. There's different ways of configuring Ephesoft, but the standard way is figuring out first page, middle pages, last pages, group them together, and putting them together. So if it went to a review stage, and perhaps somebody added some ancillary information, and they merged it into a different document, or they split different documents that were not correct, that they merged them together, their computer had them together, then this will show you what that is. I do have a question here in advanced reporting. Yes, so advanced reporting does require a separate license. So it's not, it's basically based on your environment. If you're looking for a particular price on your environment, let me know. The next one is false positive. Again, we're going to take a look at this in a second. This one is the big uh-oh. And so, this alone pays dividends. A false positive is when it went through, when a document or documents went through review confidently, ended up in validation, and then somebody said, hey, that's not that kind of document, and then changed it. So this is a big no-no, because if both those things are automated in the sense of going through review and then going through validation through extraction, then you could end up exporting incorrect information. So that's one of the reports. And then one that is maybe low-hanging fruit for your configuration is unnecessary review. Unnecessary review is that a document came into review, and that document had a confidence that was lower than the threshold set, but it was never changed. And so nobody changed any of that document in itself. So it may be that your confidence is just a little bit too high and just needs tweaking, and that way you can automate more of those. And I do have another question. So do advanced reporting provide stats about operators' performance? And that was part of what I just covered in standard, and I can go ahead and go back for that particular demonstration. But there is one of the reports that's standard that shows you kind of user operation and review and validation, how long it takes them to process these documents. The extraction correction gives you exactly that. And so when you have fields and those fields have extraction, then it's going to show you this is what the system pulled out, this is what the user changed it to, and show you all the report. One of the things that I noted here is PII. And so when you have an implementation, and you might be pulling something like social security number, normally within the system of Ephesoft, none of the data is kept. What I mean by that is that data is never, for the particular instance that is extracted off a document, is not kept in the database. It's kept within an XML file, and then ends up getting cleaned up after it moves to reporting, with the exception on if you have advanced reporting. So if you have a field and that field is a social security number, then it's going to show up inside of here. So there are things that we've done to figure out if we can encrypt the database and do other things. So there's different ways around that if that is interesting. But just note that that data is now inside of your database. So let's go back to this. So this was the last thing that we're on per the question around operator, kind of a multiple use of different terms here. In this case, user throughput is operators. And so those operators, you can see that they've worked on a few batches, and this is how many in seconds that it took them to get through the various stages of that. In this case, review, I can look to see what they did in validation, and then be able to see how much time was spent inside of the validation. So again, this can be exported, and once it's exported, then you can crunch these numbers and figure out, even with other data, if you want to merge data together to figure out, like, well, how many documents or pages were in a given batch, because it might have taken them longer just because somebody's dealing with a jumbo loan that's 1,600 pages, and somebody was really fast because they ended up just getting a trailing document for an underwriting of a loan, and that had 2. So not apples and oranges when it comes to that, but definitely the data is inside of there, inside of standard reporting. So going back to the advanced reporting, we have the document classification. And so moving over there, let's change the date. You can see this kind of gives us a visualization at this level to figure out what's working well. You can see that something I'm going to show you today around passports and driver's license, not classifying well at all, for that matter. So you can see that for the things I've been running are basically black and white. They have been classified or they have not. Here you can see all the different document types and their accuracy. So 0 or 100%, black or white. And then you're able to drill down to more details inside of the correction details and see what has been changed. And so you can see here that this particular batch class, there are some documents that came in that were unknown. Those were classified inside of review. Same thing goes with this in our mortgage package here, and that this particular old document type, this wasn't unknown, but it was a low confidence, that there was a Collateral Protection Act notice, but it turns out that it was a gift letter. And so that threshold for that collateral protection notice was 17. Again, this is a score, not a percentage, and the confidence of that was a 12, so it did stop in review. Somebody changed it. Okay, again, export the information off of all these advanced reports. So I will go over that once. Same thing goes with the separation. You can see here, I think that I've only merged like one document. And you could, maybe a couple. So there was a merging of a driver's license, and there was some merging of an invoice, the various separation accuracy. And then again, you can go down to the details. That way you can figure out exactly what batch class, what was changed. So you can see here, there was a document that was a driver, that was specified as a driver's license. It had an old page count of 1 and a new page count of 2. Same thing goes with some deleted invoices as well as merged invoices in a different batch class. False positives, I didn't set any of these because I set any of these up. So even if I change the date, it's not going to have any data. Again, that is when a document is confidently classified and then changed inside of validation. And then unnecessary review, I might not have any inside of there either, which is when a document type comes in, it just has a lower confidence than the threshold, and then it gets pushed through by an operator. Those are all the different document corrections, so that has to do with essentially the assembly and the identification of different documents. The next one is extraction. And we could change date. Wish that stayed sticky, but it does not. And you can see here, again, that the change ratio of these invoices, of these filled counts is pretty much 100%. Deed of trust mortgage, 25% change ratio, loan estimate, 13%, and so on. And then you can drill down and figure out exactly what you're looking for inside of the correction details. And here's where I was talking about you're going to have possibly PII inside of this document. So you can see that in here I had a phone number, and it turns out that it didn't pull the extension, so somebody put in the extension. And here I just purposely put something that said modified value just so I can get some data inside of here, and so on and so forth. These are ones where nothing was pulled and then data was entered. And that was very specific to some data that I sent in, some invoices that I had not trained at all. Actually, I didn't train even the extraction of those documents. So I wanted to see them in here. Again, this information get pulled out, that way you can figure it out. Going back, well, there's one other piece, which I'll go over briefly, but essentially this analysis just kind of gives you a different view of the same information that we just went over. So this gives you the capability of starting to start looking and saying, okay, what are the document types that are changed? And I can go ahead and say, was the document type changed? And I could say, I just want things that were changed, and I can add that. So it just gives you a little bit more widgets to be able to filter through and find the data that you really want to find inside of here. What batch class, what was the old document type, what was the new document type, different various confidence. What was the batch class in, what was the ID of that batch class. So just all the information that to really do some root cause analysis. Same thing goes with the fill correction. I might do something very similar to this, where is the fill changed? True. And then be able to look to see, what did the system think it was? What did somebody change it to? In this case, if you remember, I think that it was in week 2 or 3 that we talked about this Vidado integration. That was only because I did it inside of validation. And so inside of validation, I said, go look at Vidado and extract those values that were handwritten. And so those were changed inside of validation. So in any case, this is the data that we've been messing with and the image that we've been messing with for Professor Pat. All right, so those are the advanced pieces. So if you look to it, the first 2 folders, dashboard reports and throughput reports, are standard, advanced report, and the analysis grid are advanced. So any questions before I move on about reporting? That's my spiel, or at least the high-level spiel of reporting. Cool. I did receive a question this week around formatting an amount field, but this goes for other things, into a decimal. And so I thought that we might want to take a look at that, since some of the things were not that apparent. So what I did was I just created a simple document type that has one field. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. And so I have a document type of invoice, and that has a field of amount. So one of the capabilities that you have inside of Ephesoft Transact is this format conversion. Inside of format conversion, you can see that you have prefixes, suffixes, replace, change case. So you can select one or more of these various options. The 2 that I use for the most part are this replace and actually fetch named group, but we're not really going over that inside of here. So if you have specific questions about trying to format or normalize data, please ask me and we can go over it on a one-on-one, or I can also add it to a future Professor Pat session. So let's look at something like we have $12 million, just because big numbers are good. So one of the things we might want to do is say replace, and I want to remove the $sign because I want to remove this as a decimal, because at the end of the day I might want to do some math with these values, and find out if certain values are certain thresholds. So I might figure out somebody is their income and their income ratio to debt ratio, or if they're looking for a certain amount of loan, that everything is triggered in such a way that I can do some of the flagging inside of here and automation inside of here, or just down the road and not want to do more formatting. So what I want to do is I want to first remove this $, because that's one of the values perhaps that you're extracting off of that value. And so I can go ahead and test that. Sorry, what did I do here? I didn't validate. Validate regex, there we go. And so you can see here, I'm just testing through it. That removed that, that value of the dollar symbol. But wait, like I might have to remove these commas. And so I can add another one, and I can say comma again and remove, change them to empty, and I can validate and test that format. Apparently I'm not validating quick enough. Oh, and why isn't it like that? Oops, I'm pressing the wrong regex. Validate. There we go. So that only removed one of them, but then I can say remove all of them. And that removed all of them. But as you know, not everything is that that well OCR'd. So in often cases, what if this comes out to be a decimal and this comes out to be a decimal? So very typical OCR issue is that a comma might come out as a decimal. But if we add another one and we say go ahead and remove all explicit decimals and make those empty, well, that removed the first one, but there was two of them. So let's go ahead and run that again. Now I'm kind of host because the cents are now dollars, and now I'm dealing with $1 billion value as opposed to a $12 million value. So that's not good. And so what I might want to do is something a little bit more advanced and say, okay, well, I'm looking for that, but I'm also looking for that when, and again, this is regular expression, so this is not for the weak of hearted. This is a positive look ahead. So I'm going to look for saying, go ahead and look for times when there's a decimal, but it's followed by 3 digits. And so this isn't actually capturing this information, but it's looking for decimals that are followed by 3 digits. And so I can validate that and run that, and there's the value that I want. So this is just a sample of kind of what you can do with a particular value. And hold on one second, got a question coming in. Oh, nope, they're just correcting me that I'm not pressing the right button, which is correct. So that is what the format conversion does. And then there's a kind of common mistake. So the common mistake is that they do this, they send stuff through, and it didn't do anything. By default, there is a plugin that runs these rules. And by default, that plugin is not activated. So make sure that you add that particular plugin. You want to do it after all the various extraction that you're using. That way you end up with whatever normalization or filtering that you want to do, typically. And then you want to deploy that change. And then inside of there, make sure that it is on. Got another question. Is the format conversion able to replace using capture values like using $1? Yes. So it could be going back to the format conversion. You might be able to add another one, so you might want to add a fetch group. So let's go ahead and add something like 3 digits with a decimal, followed by, well, let's make them groups. So the parentheses are what's representative in regular expression as in groups. And then I want to find everything else under the sun. So if I just wanted that, going back to that value that we had of saying, you know, let's say 12, so then we can just say that I just want like the dollar amount. And so in that case, I can say $1, which is the first group, find those first, oh, actually the first 3 digits, let's make it simple. And find the first 3 digits followed by, actually it's gonna be this one anyway, followed by that. And so we can go ahead and validate that regex, test the format, and you can see that it's getting like it turns out that everything's in that first group for the digits. I may do it a little bit more explicitly and put a comma, and that's going to change it significantly, or should, and find the first 2. So, and anyway, there's different ones: substrings, change cases, date conversions. You can see that, you know, some of them will be grayed out depending on what you select. Like if you're going to do a date conversion, you can only do a date conversion. So the other way of doing this, which is very traditional, is use scripting. So that makes things easier and harder. The reason that it makes things easier is that you can make very generic rules, and you can like have a type for date. So the fields that you have that are dates, you can specify are type date. In the Ephesoft world, it's not really kept in a schema that restricts it to not being a date. It's just a string, but it types it. And so what you can do is then look for anything with that type of date and then run your own logic. So if somebody adds on something later in the sense of a new document type, a new field that so happens to be document type, you don't have to remember to go inside of that field and set up the formatting of that field. Same thing goes with if you said something's a decimal like we just did now, you can just do general logic inside of scripting and be able to just kind of cover the gambit for anything within that batch class that needs that logic. Any questions on formatting? All right, we're gonna move on. Actually, let's move on to here. You may or may not have been seeing the marketing that's been going on, but there's this new feature in Ephesoft. This is an add-on called QuickScreen. And so I figured that I'd go over to figure out what QuickScreen is. QuickScreen is the capability of having like the support of about 200 country IDs, so passports, driver's license, identification cards, and it's pre-trained. And so what you can do is you can download the document types, and those document types will then use a secure web service to go call out and then pull the information back for that particular identifier. Right now, it's not classifying those. I think that that's going to be changing. And again, it's an add-on to Ephesoft Transact, but it can give you a lot of features if you're dealing with IDs like really quickly. So anytime you're doing any sort of benefits processing, or the capability of loan underwriting and that initial underwriting to make sure that they say they are who they are, then they can have that feature and functionality. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. For some reason, my mouse is acting weird. Hold on. All right, there we go. So what I did was I sent in a few, and these did go to review. And so I did specify whether they were a driver's license or they were a passport. So if you're just dealing with a driver's license and you have a batch class, then you can just automatically say everything is a driver's license. And what you can see here is that it's actually pulling a lot of the information. It doesn't show where that information is getting pulled, but you can see that the data in itself is getting pulled out from these different documents. And I just kind of got samples from different states. I threw in a passport, just a single page off of a passport, and it's getting all the data, including the MRZ information. And so this is fairly impressive in the sense of what it's extracting. And the reason why it's impressive is that traditionally, and the reason that driver's licenses are so difficult is because they're not meant to be copied, they're not meant to be read, And so it's difficult to actually pull information off these documents, just the way that they're layered and have information on it, like, you know, different holograms and different insignias, and it's hard to do that, especially when you're dealing with all the different states. One of the interesting things in here too is right now they're kind of throwing the information of the clips of the user's photo, as well as the signature in base 64. And so it'd be, I think that they're actually adding this to a script right now. But if I went in and just kind of added this all in and then use some online utility to convert it, you can see that, you know, you have the image of the particular photograph, and then you also have the signature. So if you're having to keep those, or you wanted to create a profile inside of, for that particular user with an image, you can see that it's actually pulling that information as well. And I think that's what I prepped for you today. So any questions on what I covered or anything else under the sun? No. Well, in that case, I think that we're done for session 6 of Office Hours with Professor Pat. Thanks again for attending. Let me know if you have any questions for future sessions, and we're just going to keep on doing this. I think that we have, at least 2 more slated, and then if there's enough interest and we keep on getting people that are showing up, then we're going to keep on having them. So let me know what you want to chat about, and we'll keep it going. Thanks a lot for joining.